All right. Hello, everyone. So excited to welcome you to our second event in the Backcountry Ski and Splitboarding series presented by Sierra Nevada. Tonight, I'm so excited to have author David Goodman joining us. And before we dive in and get to hear all about all the awesome backcountry skiing and touring in the Northeast, a few notes from Mappy Hour. I will be your moderator tonight. I'm Sarah. I'm the founder of Mappy Hour. So feel free to get in the comments, say hi, introduce yourself, where you're from, where you are in your backcountry skiing journey. Everyone is welcome here. And I just wanted to let you know we expect everyone to be kind to each other and treat each other with respect. So please be nice. And at the end tonight, David will be answering questions. So throughout the night, if anything occurs to you, just put that in the chat and we'll make sure that that gets brought up at the end. I also am really excited to announce that FatMap is giving everyone who's attending and registered through mappyhour.org a free 1 month trial of their Explore. So that'll be emailed out to everyone tomorrow. And of course, with that, we have another event next week and the week after. So check out all the cool backcountry skiing stuff we're doing. And thanks again to Sierra Nevada for helping to make this all possible. So with that, here is David Goodman.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm going to take the happy hour part of Mappy Hour because when Sarah originally contacted me, I heard happy hour, so sorry. So I am inviting you to take your beverage of choice. Mine is Heady Topper, which is the magic elixir of Vermont. And I'm going to pour myself a glass because I think that's kind of the whole point of these things, that even though we can't connect in person, we can still enjoy our favorite beverage, which for me is always going to be a Vermont IPA, since Vermont is where I live. And here's to backcountry skiing in the Northeast, of which the season is now officially well underway. So I am going to take you along on some of my favorite places to ski in the Northeast. So a little bit about me and what I've been doing. In the late 1980s, I got a call from the Appalachian Mountain Club asking me if I would be interested in writing a book about skiing. They didn't really have any guidelines because it turns out they weren't really skiers or backcountry skiers. They thought of themselves as a hiking organization. And I later learned that this was a very radical idea for them to do a ski book. But that was sort of funny to me because I'm a ski history buff, and I knew that the AMC was actually a big promoter of skiing back in the 1930s. So I decided to do a book on what I love to do and was trying to figure out more about, which was skiing in the highest peaks of the Northeast. And while that may not seem so unusual today, in the 1980s, really the high peaks had been abandoned pretty much to snowshoers. But I knew that back in the 30s and 40s, there was a whole culture around cutting trails, finding, big bowls to ski all throughout the highest peaks of the Northeast. So I went in search of those. I was looking at old historic maps and then going and finding them. And the result of that, and was the very first book. Let me move backwards here. This, Classic Backcountry Skiing, was the first edition and the first guidebook to backcountry skiing in the Northeast that I wrote back in the late 1980s. And a lot of this was a research to look at the other heyday of backcountry skiing in the Northeast, which was actually almost 100 years ago. Backcountry skiing enjoyed this heyday just after the Great Depression, when the Civilian Conservation Corps went around. Well, I'll just take you through a quick little spin through these books. So 10 years later, I wrote, the book got broken into 2 volumes, and it got renamed Backcountry Skiing Adventures. This is the Maine, New Hampshire book. This was the Vermont book, so now we're up to about 2,000. And then in 2010, Best Backcountry Skiing in the Northeast, new title, same basic idea. And now for 2020, 2021, we are back with Best Backcountry Skiing in the Northeast, 50 classic ski and snowboard tours in New England and New York. And so these books, and if you want to know more about it, bestbackcountryskiing.com is the website where you can order signed copies and all that. But so when I did this book about skiing in the highest peaks, I thought about 100, it would sell about 100 copies. I did not tell my publisher this. And that if it sold 100 copies, I would know or be related to 95 of the people, because not that many people were backcountry skiing. There was a little revival going on of telemark skiing at that time. And it turned out the book came at a time, and I guess was part of kind of a whole renaissance of backcountry skiing in the Northeast. And people began heading for the highest hills. And so now here we are 30 years later. And a lot of what this was me back in the first edition digging an avalanche pit on Mount Katahdin in Maine. And for that first edition, I lived out of my 1974 Dodge Dart and skied all around the Northeast. But the sport that we are now, taking on, and for many people, maybe it's a new thing, actually is not new. And this was that previous era, that heyday that I'm talking about from the 30s. This is on Cannon Mountain. And this is an era known as the walk-up skiing era, for reasons you can plainly see. The skiers that are walking up, really skinning up on the left, skiing down on the right, also known as the down mountain skiing era. And these were the folks who started it all. This was the Civilian Conservation Corps, the Depression era Jobs Corps, that was sent by the man in the middle with the very nice fedora and sweater he has on. His name was Charlie Lord. A funny thing about the CCC was it was put under the control of this. This was the so-called Roosevelt's Forest Army. It was a jobs program for unemployed men from the city, and large contingents of axe and saw wielding men were sent to rural areas, put under the control of the state forester. And in Vermont, that was a man named Perry Merrill, who had gotten his training as a forester in Sweden, where he saw that skiing was life. And he had a crazy idea that maybe skiing could be a way out of poverty for this poor rural state of Vermont, where he was the forester. So he is given thousands of men, and whereas in other states the CCC was sent to build roads and other such things, he sent them up the highest mountain in Vermont, Mount Mansfield. And here they are cutting the very first ski trail in Vermont, the Bruce Trail on Mount Mansfield. So, skiing picked up, and by the late 30s, early 40s, chairlifts quickly followed where these pioneers, trailblazers, had been. And many of these trails, and also there were pretty good skiers in the day. This is skiing Tuckerman Ravine on Mount Washington. So many of these, handmade CCC trails became the nucleus of the new ski areas. But many that didn't have a chairlift on them were abandoned. This was a trailblazer from the Adirondacks named Jackrabbit Johansson. He was from Montreal, and he pioneered an amazing style of skiing, basically skiing stream beds, hiking trails, you name it. And that tradition is still alive and well in the Adirondacks. Some other photos from back in the day. This is in the Great Gulf. That's Mount Washington summit in the background. This shot from the 40s. And this shot of skiing Great Gulf is from the last decade. It is from now, but the landscape remains the same, and skiers are exploring that same terrain, which still is forever wild and forever alluring. So this is Mount Washington. On the left, you see that kind of looks like a half a teacup that is Tuckerman Ravine, which was and on the right, the other teacup is Huntington Ravine, which is primarily an ice climbing area, but now also gets skied. And Mount Washington has been luring skiers for 100 years to ski the steepest terrain in the East. There's a close-up of Tuckerman Ravine. And, this area, the Tuckerman's is a place you might, associate the landscape with skiing out west or in Europe, but it is a place that will challenge you, scare you, thrill you, and there's endless skiing possibilities there, but also all around Mount Washington. This is actually the photo on the cover of the new edition of my book, skiing in Tuckerman Ravine. One thing about Tuckerman's, and we'll talk about this a little more, is it's a place that does avalanche. And as you get into backcountry skiing, a lot of our terrain, we're lucky in the East, is not necessarily avalanche prone. But the steepest terrain, steep open slopes like Tuckerman's, also Mount Katahdin in Maine, and some of the other wilderness ravines around Mount Washington will avalanche, and you really need to take an avalanche class, become familiar with those hazards. And this is also in Tuckerman Ravine, some of the amazing skiing and amazing skiers you will see around there. Many of some of the best skiers in the country, including Olympic skiers, have cut their eye teeth in tucks, as it's known. The landscape that we have, people think of the East and they think of tight trees and the ice coast. I would just like to say that I pretty much only ski powder. I don't go out when it's icy. I always look for where I'm going to find soft snow. And I have no shortage of ski days in the Northeast. So if you are a powder lover, welcome to the feast. There is plenty of it. Another photo of skiing in Tuckerman's. Also in Tuckerman's. And this is one of the wilderness ravines next to Tuckerman's. So Tuckerman's is known as the steep skiing playground. This is Oaks Gulf. Tuckerman's is surrounded by other skiable ravines, and I write about all of these in my book as possibilities. So this is some of the steeper and wilder terrain. This is Gulf of Slides, which is also near Tuckerman Ravine. It's accessed from the same place, the Pinkham Notch, which is the headquarters, the backcountry headquarters of the Appalachian Mountain Club up in the mountains of New Hampshire. And this is another bowl on Mount Washington, Ammonoosuc Ravine. So all of these, Mount Washington is massive and it is ringed by skiable terrain everywhere. And this is King Ravine in the White Mountains, in the northern edge of the White Mountains, a beautiful wilderness ravine. Some of the steep gullies of the Great Gulf, another ravine that is just north of Tuckerman Ravine. You reach it via some of the same trails. Well, I'm going to move around the Northeast. This is now the summit of Mount Moosilauke, which is, and in the background, the Franconia Ridge of New Hampshire. If you know where Cannon Mountain is, it's very close to there. Moosilauke is a fabled spot in New England ski history. It's actually owned by Dartmouth College, and there is a beautiful wilderness lodge, three-season wilderness lodge called the Ravine Lodge, that's owned and operated by Dartmouth. It was recently rebuilt to a state-of-the-art, super efficient structure. Unfortunately, it is not yet open in the winter, although it used to be. And I'm hoping that Dartmouth can be persuaded that now that it has a new lodge, it's ready for winter again. They've been skiing on Mount Moosilauke. The first race in North America, sanctioned race, was on Mount Moosilauke. And there's still good skiing and beautiful landscape there. So backcountry skiing takes all shapes, sizes, and varieties. There's the steep terrain in the high mountains, but there's also just beautiful touring to be done in the lower elevations of the mountains. This is in the White Mountains and Greeley Pond Wilderness Area, which is in New Hampshire off the Kankamagus Highway. Moving over to Vermont, this is close to where I live in Stowe. The Trapp Family Lodge and Stowe Mountain Resort Cross Country Centers are a gateway to a number of old trails cut by the CCC. This is the Steeple Trail in Stowe. I just wrote about skiing the steeple for the Boston Globe last week. And these trails have been well maintained, really brought back to life by a new generation of skiers. This is skiing the Woodward Mountain Trail, which is reached via Bolton Valley ski area. You can ski right off the back of Bolton Valley. And Bolton Valley, I wrote about in the New York Times just over a month ago, is a great place if you're new to backcountry skiing. They rent backcountry gear, skins, skis, the whole kit. They also have guided skiing if you'd rather go with a guide. They'll teach you the basics. So it's a really user-friendly place to get started. This is also skiing in the backcountry around Bolton. Bolton is kind of the hub where many spokes radiate outward. This is beautiful powder bowls off of the Woodward Mountain Trail. And this person is splitboarding, which is, for those of you who aren't familiar with that, it's a snowboard. You can see a line down the center of the snowboard. It splits in half so you can ski uphill and snaps back together so you can snowboard downhill. This is 30 years ago, me skiing the Teardrop Trail, one of the first trails on Mount Mansfield, the highest peak in New Hampshire. And this is skiing the Teardrop more recently. The Teardrop is a legendary trail, also designed by that fellow Charlie Lord, who I mentioned from an earlier slide. And it is a very reliable stash of powder. The Bruce Trail, which you saw the picture of with all those CCC men waiting to cut, this is skiing the Bruce Trail today. As you can see, it's still in fantastic shape. It's a 3-mile long descent. You actually can reach the top via a chairlift at Stowe Mountain Resort, or you can skin up to it. But still a great run, still packs plenty of thrills. And this is skiing sort of a gentler tour into Nebraska Notch, not far from Mount Mansfield in Vermont. And one of the more famous tours is on the Bolton to Trapp Trail, which is part of a 300-mile-long backcountry trail called the Catamount Trail in Vermont. This is sort of one of the gems of the Catamount. And it connects two great resorts, Bolton Valley and Trapp Family Lodge. The story behind this trail, which is about 6 miles, well, depending on where you exit the trail, anywhere from 6 to 9 miles long. I talked to Johannes von Trapp, who owns the Trapp Family Lodge, and he described how he thought that skiing hut to hut and ski area to ski area back in the early 70s, that this was the future of skiing. And he couldn't believe that really what skiers flocked to was his groomed cross-country trail. So he cut this trail along with another fellow named Gardner Lane from Bolton Valley. They're kind of two pioneers of skiing in Vermont. And it turns out this was not the centerpiece of his operation. It was his hotel and his groom trails. But nowadays, as this has been integrated into the Catamount Trail Network, it is once again really a star attraction. And this is Johannes' son, Sam von Trapp, on his first descent on a beautiful powder day, skiing the Bolton to Trapp Trail named for his family. This is skiing the Bolton Trap Trail. Just this time last year, on an early morning ski across that I did, um, and it says looking north towards Mount Mansfield. Also on the Bolton Trap Trail. There is a gentler way to ski this, but there's a lot of powder shots on the sides if you want to ski it a little more aggressively. This is Big J. So if you've been to J Peak, you know J Peak is known for its glades and whatnot. Big J is a wilderness peak that you can access from J Peak or from the road, and it too has become a very popular powder trove in the Northeast. Also on Big J, this is skiing something that has come to be known as Jailhouse Chute. And that is because some overzealous locals about 12 years ago showed up with chainsaws, and really very, very unfortunate. They cut down a lot of trees. It didn't need that. Big J has plenty of natural open glades. But anyway, the chute remains. The men were arrested and ended up doing some time. So Jailhouse Chute is what remains in their wake. And people should not cut pirate lines anymore like this. And New York State, a state better known for maybe traffic jams and for congestion in New York City. Well, this is the other end of New York State. This is skiing Mount Marcy, the highest peak in New York, which is a beautiful ski tour. This is also up in the Adirondacks, access from Lake Placid. Avalanche Lake is a beautiful tour to an area of ice cliffs and frozen lakes that you ski up to and around. One of the stories that I really enjoyed is the story of the Thunderbolt Ski Trail on Mount Greylock, the highest peak in Massachusetts. Back in the 80s, when I first was exploring some of these historic ski trails, I learned about the Thunderbolt, went to go find it and ski it. I showed up after a big snowstorm, and a ranger at a nearby state park told me that my partners and I were going to die if we went and skied the Thunderbolt. No one skied it anymore. So that, of course, was made it even more exciting to go find. So we did find the Thunderbolt. We had old maps, and it was kind of barely there. You could it was very brushy. We skied it. I put it in the book in that first edition. And a local school teacher by the name of Blair Mahar had read about the Thunderbolt and assigned to his class, this is in North Adams, Mass, to interview older local people about the Thunderbolt, to learn about the era when thousands of people would come line the trail to watch all the big colleges, Williams, Harvard, Dartmouth, come and race there on this legendary trail. Well, one thing led to another, and the community essentially brought the Thunderbolt back to life. You see here the sign, the big shush. They labeled all the sections. This is a warming hut at the top that they, revived and dedicated it to a famous skier of the trail, Rudy Konechny, who from the 30s, he later died in World War II in the 10th Mountain Division. And this is skiing the Thunderbolt today. You can see this has been, it is back to its full glory. And, there's now a museum in downtown Adams. This was the 75th anniversary. The town has really adopted the Thunderbolt as part of its heritage. And it's really great to see this new life. And to me, it's proof that lightning does indeed strike twice. And now we go to the granddaddy of the Northeast, and that is Katahdin in Maine. Apparently, it is referred to Katahdin means great mountain, so you don't call it Mount Katahdin, although many people do. Anyway, Katahdin is a place that looks more out of the Alps than out of the east. but it's home to great mountaineering, great skiing again. There are avalanche issues to be concerned about here, so that's something you need to get trained in. But it is a thrilling landscape. These are photos by the photographer Jamie Walter, who really brought back just the best ski photos from Katahdin, and they're also in my book. And every place, there's skiing everywhere. This is Acadia in Maine. You can see the Atlantic Ocean off in the distance. There's great skiing to be done there. You have to move quickly. And that coastal climate, the ski, the snow is now you see it, now you don't. But they do have their powder days, and this is one of them. When I first wrote these books, Maine was kind of a problem because Maine has been so heavily logged that it didn't really have great skiing. Well, people ask, does anything change in the 10-year intervals that I've done these books? This is now the 4th iteration. And I can confirm that things change a lot. Maine is now home to 2 of the best hut-to-hut trail networks in the country, not just the East. This is one of them, Maine Huts and Trails. And as you can see, a hut is a little bit of a misnomer here. This is a gorgeous, state-of-the-art, off-grid backcountry lodge. The interior is all done by local craftspeople. This is skiing. Last year, we skied 4 nights. This is looking at Great Falls, one of the beautiful wilderness falls on the Dead River of Maine that you ski alongside. This is another hut system in Maine run by the Appalachian Mountain Club through what is known as the 100-mile wilderness. Again, these are beautiful lodges. The season for skiing there is, at this point, it runs from early January to just the beginning of March. So you need to jump on it quickly, but the trails are groomed. They shuttle your gear. And while, purists might say, well, I'm not, is that really backcountry? All I can say is, these full service lodges where you sit down to breakfast and dinner together and have trail lunches, it is a pretty spectacular way to enjoy the North Country of Maine. This is skiing between the lodges. And here, instead of heavy backcountry skis, we're on lightweight cross-country skis that you would use at a cross-country center. This is another one of the lodges on the Appalachian Mountain Club route. So one of the other things that has happened is the growth of a community-supported skiing movement, a grassroots skiing movement. This is in Vermont, a group called RASTA, which is the Randolph-Rochester Sports Trail Alliance, and they have cut new ski trails in conjunction with the U.S. Forest Service. So now hundreds of people come out in the fall to cut the trails that they later come to ski. New Hampshire has the Granite Backcountry Alliance, is a kind of a similar organization. And this is some of the great skiing that you now can find that has been created. And it really is a throwback to the 30s when the CCC that was the last era of backcountry ski trail cutting. And now we have a new era, and there is just fabulous terrain. You got to get there early because it's very popular. So parking becomes an issue, but check ahead. This is all part of the multiple glade zones that have been cut by RASTA in Vermont. And here we are in New Hampshire, Granite Backcountry Alliance. That's actually Tyler Ray, the founder of Granite Backcountry Alliance, skiing there through one of their first sort of signature projects, Maplevilla Glade, which is right outside of North Conway. And this is a Baldface. So again, they got permission to work with the U.S. Forest Service to actually, well, this is a natural open slope, but to create gladed terrain for skiers. This is another Granite Backcountry Alliance glade zone called Crescent Ridge, which is, again, north of North Conway, north of Pinkham Notch. another split border in the Granite Backcountry Zone. And this is in Vermont at Mount Ascutney, which is a former downhill ski area that closed and has been brought back to life by the community and has been made into a backcountry ski area, which is a whole nother movement afoot. There's another defunct ski area in southern Vermont, Dutch Hill, that is getting a lot of attention as backcountry skiers bring it back to life. So there is, there's life after death in skiing. And this is Dutch Hill, which is right on the Mass border, a defunct ski area that the Forest Service has given permission to recut. Tuckerman Ravine, this is the Avalanche Advisory Board. There is when you ski there, there's the Mount Washington Avalanche Center. You should find its forecasts on the web and heed what it says well. Avalanches are a major hazard in the backcountry on open slopes in particular, or on steep slopes. So this is an avalanche class being run by one of the groups around Mount Washington. And a little bit about the spirit of backcountry skiing. I generally say that anything that can go wrong will go wrong. This is my telemark binding snapping in the middle of a tour. Fortunately, I had some repair equipment that I could put things back together, but you need to be prepared for when things don't go as you planned. So having, the part of the explosion and also I would say humility, very important for the toolkit of the Eastern backcountry skier. It's, being able to drop it on a dime, very important skill for these parts. And, getting to know not just the texture of snow, but the taste of snow, part of the toolkit and mental preparation that Eastern skiers go through. This is snowcat skiing Vermont style. I got invited to go snowcat skiing on Camel's Hump last winter, and when we showed up, this was the contraption they had sitting in the bucket loader of this this little device, which of course, being the rustic affair that it was, ended up getting stuck and we had to pull it out. But the reward was this, a beautiful powder glade on Camel's Hump. Another part of that skiing mission on Camel's Hump. I was going to say that, what we're seeing right now with the COVID pandemic, which is that, it's part of a perfect storm that has energized the backcountry skiing movement, where for many people now, backcountry skiing is the only skiing they're doing. Gear stores are reporting huge runs on skis and all outdoor equipment. So this is the winter of backcountry. It also comes at a time when backcountry ski equipment has made it so that anyone who can ski can backcountry ski, provided you pick up the necessary outdoor skills, learning about navigation, first aid, which there are many places you can learn those things. This is a ski tour through the Pemigewasset Wilderness. Some of the funny things that happen along my travels. I encountered these guys. They were high up in a tree. I asked them what was wrong, and they said there was a moose threatening to kill them. So I offered to ski around the bend to see the moose, and did indeed see this little calf. I told the guys they could come down, and I shooed away the moose. They said, no, it wasn't that little baby calf. It was the mama, and she wanted to kill them. So who knows, but you never know what you'll find when you head to the backcountry. But one thing you can be sure of finding in the Northeast is beautiful terrain, great skiing, and adventures that will keep you busy for a lifetime. So that's the end of my slides. And I am happy to take any questions.
All right. I'm
here.
hopping back in, David, to help you with questions.
Okay, great.
All right, thank you. That was awesome. It makes me want to go skiing right this second.
Well, it's good right now, so that's good.
It's good timing, right? All right, we're already getting questions, so I'll start with one from Nathan, who's asking, have you ever had any interest or thoughts to include backcountry routes from the Catskills Park in the book?
I have not. I don't know the Catskills, but I think that is a great project for somebody who does know the Catskills and the skiing there. The issue that you get as you go further south is the reliability of the snow. And with climate change, this is really becoming an issue. The southern routes, even in my book, I'd get down to the coast of Maine, I get down to Acadia. They're just getting iffier and iffier. So, but listen, I think if there's the backcountry skiers of the Catskills, if they want to share their secrets, the field is wide open.
Everyone's ready.
Yes.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. And related, but slightly different, any thoughts on how New York backcountry skiers can work with the DEC? What lessons can we learn from groups like Granite and Catamount?
That's a very interesting question. So DEC, of course, is the governing entity in the Adirondack Park. The Adirondacks have struggled with not having permission to be able to recut trails and glades because of the very tight rules governing the park. I know that the Adirondack Powder Alliance has been trying to work with them at a minimum, to keep existing trails like the Wright Peak Ski Trail and the Mount Marcy Ski Trails. Well, it's a hiking trail and ski trail. And I think it's important for skiers to make their voices heard, let them know that this is something that people want. But there is also skiing outside Adirondack Park. So,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of great skiing in the park that I do write about. So lots of great skiing and the potential for lots more.
Yeah. All right. And all right, we got a safety question from Jacob. What are some of the best resources for weather, abbey conditions, and general coverage conditions for Tuckerman?
Well, that's simple. The Mount Washington Avalanche Center, which just Google it. I think it's Mount Washington Avalanche Center.org. Has daily forecasts. It also lists conditions on the Sherburne Ski Trail, which is the way in. And by the way, for folks looking for kind of a good introductory place going up to Mount Washington, skiing the Sherburne Ski Trail, the Gulf of Slides ski trails, these are really user-friendly, good places for people new to backcountry skiing to get their legs. You can check out Tuckerman Ravine. It's probably a bit more than, a newcomer wants to take on. But anyway, Mount Washington Avalanche Center is a great resource for all things avalanche stuff. There's also some Facebook groups. There's a group called Friends of Tuckerman Ravine. They have some useful information. And there's good resources on, on Facebook. There are user groups for backcountry skiers in the Northeast that there's a lot of trip reports that people will post.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. All right. Gear question from Tamara. Are you on AT gear or tele gear?
I am a tele skier, but, telemark skiing, was really the mode of choice, say 10 years ago, when people say, what changes? And I say, well, everything changes between these books. Who would thunk that the revolution in amazing AT equipment has made it, the skis are so light and so good. But I continue to telemark, but that's really, I'm a minority now. I know when I talk to the big ski shops, they're saying, 80% of their backcountry ski gear is AT. So, and honestly, if you're starting out now, that is probably what you want to do. And if you're a downhill skier, you don't have to relearn how to ski. And split boarding. splitboarding being the other thing for
Yeah.
snowboarders.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Wesley asks, night skiing, question mark.
Oh,
That's the
truly
question.
adventurous. Uh, it's not something I do. I kind of like it by my wood stove at night.
Yeah.
I will say there's amazing, these LED headlamps are very inexpensive and they light up a huge swath of terrain. So I have friends who go night skiing, and if you work in the day, it's perfectly. And there's also, very dedicated dawn patrol
Yeah.
skiers and skinners up around where I live in Vermont. It's a little bit harder to do from New York City, but by all means, I mean, Central Park, night skiing, cross country skiing after a storm, sure.
Right? We just need that snow here.
You just need the snow.
Exactly. Speaking of snow, Nathan asks, how have you seen snowpack and other conditions in the on the East Coast backcountry or in the East Coast backcountry change as evidence of climate change over your 30 plus years?
That's a great question. I mean, there's no question that climate change is having a big impact, and I have a kind of epilogue in this book saying that skiers are the canary in the coal mine for climate change.
Yeah.
There are studies being done now that are showing that by the year 2040, which is not that far away, that's 20 years out, that
Yeah.
about half of the ski resorts in the Northeast will no longer have enough snow to be viable. So this is real, and yes, I'm seeing it that the southern tours are just a lot harder to get in good condition now. So that's even Western Mass and places like that. And climate change is generally marked by weather extremes. So we have enormous nor'easters, and then we have droughts. So all of these are part of it, and I would encourage people to be active. Groups like Protect Our Winters is focused on skiing and climate change, but also 350.org and other groups working on climate change. If you care about skiing, you need to care about climate change.
Yep, absolutely. And thanks for sharing those two sites. I think those are great resources for everyone to start out with, for sure.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. I think this is our last question from Brian. Outside of the trails mentioned in the new book, so if someone who's already read the new book, are there any slides, especially in the Adirondacks, that you think are worth mentioning?
So Adirondack slide skiing is a very beloved tradition and guarded secrets. I talk about some of them. Benny's slide is one that I write about, but slide skiing is, basically where there's big open slopes, there's slides. Angel Slide on Wright Peak is another. There is a book, I don't know if it's still in print, called the Adirondack Slide Guide, which is really photos. I don't believe it has the kind of the step-by-step of how to get there. Need to realize that avalanches are a real issue on the slides. There's been fatalities in the Adirondacks on the slides, so this is serious stuff. But there's great skiing on the slides too. So
yeah. All right. Well, looks like you answered everyone's questions.
Okay, great.
And thank you so much for sharing. Before we close out, I just want to remind everyone that we have two events next week. One that's all about going uphill. So if you are new and you want to try out your gear and be in a resort, we're going to be talking about that on Tuesday. And then on Thursday, we have Jeremy Davis from the from NILSAP, which is a history project all about skiing. So that's going to be super fun. All the stuff's at mappyhour.org. And thanks again to David for sharing with us. And if you don't have his book, go get it.
Yeah, bestbackcountryskiing.com. And thanks so much for having me, Sarah.
Of